Welcome back to the Vandy Sports Podcast. I'm Joey Dwyer here after some breaking news that a few weeks ago I'm not sure we thought was really even in the realm of possibilities. Before Vanderbilt's first SEC tournament game at their open practice at Bridgestone Arena, Quentin Millora-Brown told us media folk that he would return for a sixth season, and that was the plan really all along. And now today we get the news that Quentin Millora-Brown is in the transfer portal. It just kind of seems like that's what happens nowadays in college basketball. There's no givens, and even if you think a guy is rock solid to return, Millora-Brown kind of went out of his way to bring up that he was returning. He isn't, and I don't know what happened between early March and now in terms of maybe that was his grad school program, maybe it was something internally within the program, maybe Millora-Brown just had a change of heart. Who knows? Maybe we'll try to get to the bottom of that at some point, but the fact remains Quentin Millora-Brown is not a member of this program anymore, and it leaves it with more questions than it had. Yesterday, Millora-Brown was kind of that steady presence. He'd give you good defense. He'd do the dirty work for you. Maybe he'd get a basket or two here or there, but he wasn't going to be a big-time scorer. Definitely gave Vanderbilt some solid minutes down the stretch of the season, though, and he is going to be a guy who Vanderbilt misses. I'm not quite sure Quentin Millora-Brown's the type of guy who you freak out about going in the transfer portal, though. I think that's a guy who's replaceable, and Vanderbilt's recruiting pitch to incoming transfers from the portal is certainly easier now in the front court without Millora-Brown. Now Vanderbilt has a wide open front court. Now they can use that pitch to say, hey, we had Robbins produce all this last year. Quentin Millora-Brown stepped into his shoes, played some solid minutes for us. All those guys and all those minutes are gone now. And this is your chance to come in and make a splash for us. You have a chance to be kind of the guy in that front court and the guy who puts this team over the edge. Quentin Millora-Brown, I don't think was going to be that. I think he was going to be a solid player, but all along I always thought they needed one more guy in the portal to kind of fill that front court hole and fill that gap that Liam Robbins left. I don't know if Vanderbilt was 100% going to do that before, but now absolutely going to happen. It feels like it's inevitable at this point that Vanderbilt lands a transfer. Just matters as to how much that transfer can give you and how good of a player that guy is, how much eligibility he has left. Vanderbilt's got a heck of a recruiting pitch, though, after the season and after Millora-Brown's departure. You look at Liam Robbins and what he produced and the freedom he was given within this offense and kind of the freedom he had on defense to roam and block shots and really just be a focal point of this team. Now that role is wide open. And also the 15 minutes, I think, that Millora-Brown gave you, that's wide open as well. So this Vanderbilt team has a big hole in the front court. It also has a huge opportunity, though, and I think that's kind of the sentiment of what I've been trying to say the last 2 or so weeks since everybody's gone to the portal. Vanderbilt has holes all over its roster, but in this era of the transfer portal, it's not necessarily a bad thing. The recruiting pitches get stronger with the bigger the holes are, and with the backcourt talent that this team has if Tyron Lawrence returns, it's a heck of a pitch because Ezra Maudion's a guy who can really find his bigs, can really work the pick and roll with them, and Tyron Lawrence is also a guy who can give Vanderbilt some really good things. So kind of looking at this Vanderbilt roster, I think you really want a bruiser and you want a guy who's going to give you some of what Millora-Brown would have given you in terms of rebounding, in terms of blocking shots. Lee Dort's going to be a nice shot blocker. He's got a lot of developing to do on the offensive end, though. And also, I think Lee Dort has to work on foul trouble a little bit. That was also a bit of an issue from Millora-Brown, but this group, I think, has the potential to be pretty solid in the front court with the transfer, but right now, not what you want to see. Right now, Lee Dort would be the starting center. If we went into the season today, Colin Smith would probably give you some minutes downshifting to the 5, but Malik D is gone. Carter Lang's probably going to give you a few minutes if the roster stays the way it is, but I think the plan probably should be to not rely on Lang giving you a whole lot of minutes. If he comes in the summer and impresses and beats Lee Dort out for some of those minutes, beats the transfer out of a few minutes, perfect. But you don't want to rely on Carter Lang, a 6'9" guy who's going to be a freshman and isn't a freak athlete. I think he can translate at some point. He could be a nice player, but right now I think you wanted to rely on more of that veteran presence that Millora-Brown gave you, and maybe another transfer in terms of what you get in the front court now. It's got to be the transfer. It's got to be an impact guy. He's got to be a guy who can give you more than Millora-Brown gave you offensively. Obviously not going to give you as much as Robbins gave, but now you're replacing 2 guys in the front court who gave you good minutes. That was a nice 1-2 punch, although I think a lot of people complained about Millora-Brown getting too many minutes, and at some points rightly so, but that 1-2 punch was really valuable for Vanderbilt because those guys were pretty similar defensively in terms of their profiles, at least. I think Robbins was significantly better defensively. at least in terms of shot blocking. I think Millora-Brown did a nicer job against some of those more physical bigs like Oscar Tshiebwe and some of the Tennessee bigs. But overall, obviously a loss that hurts for Vanderbilt, but not a loss that you're really kicking yourself about long term. This guy who averaged 3 points a game, had averaged 5 in his best season at Vanderbilt, but really wasn't going to be a focal point offensively. It was going to give you some good things defensively, but obviously it's not Liam Robbins, and you're not as torn up about losing Millora-Brown as you were Liam Robbins when Robbins went down. Obviously going to hurt Vanderbilt, though, to have Millora-Brown go out the door just because of the veteran presence he gave him inside, what he can do off the roll, and just kind of what he could give you defensively. He was kind of that big who worked a little bit better against those more physical, lean bigs rather than Robbins, who at times got beat up by a guy like BJ Mack, who kind of segues me into my next segment, segment of sorts, is just looking at where Vanderbilt's going in the portal here. They had really looked at those kind of bruiser, dirty work type bigs, and I think Millora-Brown gave you a lot of that, but it would have been a nice compliment to have what Jerry Stackhouse calls a load in there, a guy who is just physical, he's tough, and is a guy who's hard to move off his spot. Vanderbilt has that in Lee Dort. I think he's still got a little bit of developing to do, so I wonder if they go for that and then maybe go for more of an impact big, like some of the guys they've targeted in the portal. There's just so many to name, but I think it's significant that BJ Mack is now off the board. Vanderbilt's going to have to shift its focus a little bit. It conducted an in-home with BJ Mack, ultimately didn't even make the top 5, so a lot of work to be done in the portal. Also a lot of opportunity. There's still guys putting their names in almost every day, guys who are impact players, guys who are going to be difference makers. They're not going to get Hunter Dickinson, but they're going to get a guy, at least hopefully for Jerry Stackhouse, that is going to come in and going to be able to score. And I think it's really valuable in this age of college basketball not to have a guy who clogs the lane or a guy who maybe is your focal point, being that big man who can put his back to the basket. But I think in this era of college basketball, having a guy like Liam Robbins you can dump it down to get a basket is really valuable, just because when those big runs come, there's not a whole lot of guards who can go get their own shot at a high enough level. Maybe Tyron Lawrence does that, but when the offense is stagnant, typically you want to look down to the post to get a free, quick and easy touch to your guy, like Vanderbilt had with Liam Robbins last year, and get a quick basket to stop that run, stop the bleeding. Now it's got to find that. It's got to find the shot blocking. It's got to find a veteran in there. A lot of holes in the Vanderbilt front court. Millora-Brown left a good amount of those, and also the collaboration of Robbins and Millora-Brown leaving. It's obviously going to be a big thing, and the outlook looks bleak for that front court as the roster stands today. But moving forward, who knows? It's just about as big of a question mark as you can ask for. And Millora-Brown's going to be missed for Vanderbilt, like I said. But was he a move the needle guy next year? I'm not exactly sure he was that. I think he was going to be a guy who's going to come in, give him good minutes here or there, probably play 15 to 20 minutes a night. But also he wasn't going to be the main big in an ideal world. He was going to be a guy who was kind of a complimentary big who would come in when the other guy got some fouls, come in and get some rebounds. That was probably his biggest strength this year. Averaged 4 rebounds a game, was one of Vanderbilt's better rebounders. Yeah, Millora-Brown's loss is certainly one that's notable and one we didn't expect. That puts Vanderbilt in a little bit of a hole. But also, there's room to grow here, and I think that's the thing to keep in mind moving forward. I said that in the other podcasts, and this one, it's also applicable. Jordan Wright also made a decision today that he was going to go to LSU, and I think was certainly one that made sense. Jordan Wright's from Baton Rouge, didn't get recruited by LSU out of high school, and it's going to be really interesting if logic prevails. Vanderbilt's going to have LSU at Memorial Gymnasium this year in a game that will be a rematch of the one that probably tanked Vanderbilt's tournament hopes late in the year. Now Jordan Wright's going to be on that roster as well, so that's going to be a really interesting one at Memorial Gym next year. Certainly one that I'm looking forward to if that's the case. Jordan Wright gave a lot to Vanderbilt, though, and I'd expect that reception to be pretty positive. I don't know exactly how long this is in the works for. I'm sure there's a lot that goes into this decision, though. Jordan Wright's from right around Baton Rouge. I'm sure the LSU NIL collectives are a little bit farther along, and I think Wright will have a pretty defined role with that team next year, a team that struggled this year but has some upward trajectory. Although it's losing some guys, Wright could be kind of the start of that next LSU core, although it's only for 1 year. be a really interesting year to see a guy transferring in conference and probably having him come to Memorial Gymnasium. So it makes sense for Wright. I don't know how many Vanderbilt fans really have hard feelings about that decision. I think it makes a lot of sense for him, but man, it's that going to be an interesting matchup next year. So just wanted to touch on MilloraBrown and Wright real quick, although that was earlier in the day. I think it's really impactful for Vanderbilt. Lee Dort's going to get his opportunity, and for Jerry Stackhouse, I think the next task, go get a difference maker in that front court, go get a difference maker on the wing or in the backcourt. Tyron Lawrence's decision will also, that's huge. That is what will define Vanderbilt's season, because if Lawrence decides in early June that he's going to go to the draft, there's not a whole lot of options left on the board, and not a whole lot of guys that can replace what Lawrence gave you, especially at that point in the year, especially with Vanderbilt's portal restrictions. Here we go. The next 2 months are probably the biggest of Vanderbilt's offseason. Can they land a guy here or there to be a difference maker for this team? Who knows? They got to replace Jordan Wright, got to replace Miles Studi, got to replace Quentin Millora-Brown. Those are 3 guys who started a lot of games for Vanderbilt this year, 3 guys who scored a lot of points for Vanderbilt this year and gave them a lot on the defensive end. So, like I said, here we go. The biggest 2 months of Vanderbilt's offseason, the biggest 2 months of Jerry Stackhouse's biggest offseason are coming now. The damage is probably done. Maybe one more guy enters the portal, but I think it's probably set for now. And again, here we go. It's time. It's time to build this roster out. And Jerry Stackhouse has had success in the portal before with Ezra Manjon and Liam Robbins. Can he do it again? That will determine the outcome of this season and how far Vanderbilt ultimately goes. So thank you guys for watching. God bless. And if there's more basketball news, I'll be back. Also have some baseball coverage. I think I'm doing the midweek next week, and then probably 1 or 2 of the South Carolina games. So I appreciate you guys supporting, and God bless. Peace.